Speak on timeless challenge, questions and answers for genuine growth. It's my comfort to call on Rabbi Viener for tonight's drasha.
Okay. Shkayach to Bold and the crew. Especially challenging to set this up in all the many cities and venues. And the shkayach for the Elam that's coming out, because it's easier to give the shiur when you're looking at the people, especially I'm looking at the people that I have been looking at for about 20 years. So I know they listen well. That's why they were handpicked. And it's particularly heartwarming to see the tremendous thirst of Klal Yisrael for the Dvar Hashem and to learn and to steig and to grow, and everybody that's listening out there is included, not included as secondary, but everybody's doing what they can do, which is a big theme of tonight. And as we were speaking on the phone last week, so you asked me for a title, which you normally try to do a few weeks before, and it doesn't work that quickly because there's so many things to speak about. I'd like to decide toward the end. And we left it with some question and answers, although I highly doubt anybody here will have any time to ask any questions, because the 5 or 6 or 7 that I received, each one is enough for an hour or two. But if it triggers questions, or if you can't hold yourself back, we can always try to put it in and save it for Mitzvah Shem years to come, either in Yerushalayim or other fine cities in Eretz Yisrael, or here, if we're still here. And I'm going to begin with one that I received at about 12 o'clock last night. Questions are written very well, and I threw out your email with Kadai because I'd like to hear what's on people's mind, even though I'm pretty clear on what's on people's mind, because I hear about it all day and all night. The Shailas, Halacha, Ashkafa, we're going to start off. The bulk of this is going to be very important foundations in Hashkafa, and we're going to get, if we have time, to some of the halachas that are unique to the summer, maybe even more unique to this summer. So let's begin with the first one. What I'm going to try to do to build a theme, I selected the first 3 because they had shaykhs. So if your question was sent in and we didn't get to it, it's not because it didn't fit in, but it didn't fit into the time frame. And the answer we're going to try to use is a theme that's found often in the Michtam Elio, from the Gedolei HaMachshava, Mashkichim, in the last few Deiros. And you'll notice, as it is with Gadol who works on a theme, he will take a theme and work it through different sugyas, but you'll see that it's the same author. So let's begin with the question, and he writes as follows. How can a person stay relaxed and happy when they're davening for Yeshua from Hashem, and so far Hashem's answer has been no? I've been asked this question hundreds of times in various forms, but he put it very well. And what will be in the future is unknown, so how do you deal with that, basically? So anybody who davens 3 times a day, which is everybody here, has no doubt, whether we'd like to admit it or not, has no doubt thought about this shayla, crossed your mind. Maybe you got annoyed with yourself when it crossed your mind. No need to get annoyed. It's a legitimate question, and it's very important to address to figure out how we're supposed to deal with it. So, a few hanochas and akdamas are in order, and I'm going to use them based on similar shaylas that I've dealt with. One fellow years ago came to me and he said, I want to know, is there a minimum, he wanted to really know about the maximum shear of how long you're supposed to ask for something in davening, and when are you allowed to stop? Similar question. When can you take it as a no? Is it a chutzpah to continue? And can you stop? Maybe it's a chutzpah to stop. It's lack of patience, lack of bitachon. So the first rule, I think, that is in order is that there's no isser to stop. If you're asking for something particular to your matzav, let's take common examples. I don't know if you have noticed in the middle of Shemona Esrei, there's a bracha that a lot of people have kavanah on. Which bracha do you think I might be referring to? So the tzaddikim, right? The tzaddikim will say slach lanu, but the honest people might say baruch aleinu, yeah. So, nothing wrong with that. Parnasa is a very chashuv azach, and you need to pay the bills, which is why, and slach lanu yidden are into also. And atachainen, without that, that's why it's the first bracha. If you don't know what to ask for, which is part of the shayla, if you don't know when to ask and how to ask, then the rest of Shemona Esrei is not going to go very well. So, baruch aleinu is about money. It's about parnasa. And this is not downgrading the need and the chashivas, and the Gemaras talk about parnasa and the chashivas of rain, which represents parnasa. And let's assume, as this person was assuming that I was assuming, he has what to eat, and he has a decent parnasa, but he was putting, which I often advise people, you don't have to do this either, but if you put in your own personal tefillas, that makes the Shemona Esrei more real. We can touch more. So you're allowed to put in what's relatively urgent in a particular bracha, Shema Kaleinu a little more, after the Ratzon and the Shemona Esrei a little more, and it becomes a conversation. You don't need that, because Anshe Knesset Gadol put everything in. It's a conversation anyway, but on our Madrega, many people find that useful. So he tells me, which I wasn't surprised to hear, that in Berei Chaleinu for many years, he's been asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for parnasa, which he had already, a nice one, and thanking Hashem for that parnasa and moedim. But in Berei Chaleinu, he was also putting in that it's very nice, but if I had a few more millions, or whatever the case may be, I have great plans for various tzedakahs and inyanim, and he meant it, and nothing wrong with asking. Could be a little dangerous. Money, like any bracha, is a slippery slope, but no tainas. But he tells me he's been asking for many, many years. Should he give up? He'll say he has a nice parnasa, and what does he need the extra money? He's asking many years. So I told him right away. I said, you didn't have to ask in the first place. Nothing wrong with asking. You could certainly stop. He said, well, is that a chisaron if I stop? I said, it's not a chisaron if you stop. You don't have to focus on the same thing. And the reason is because the way this person phrases the question, I seem to be getting a no, so am I supposed to be relaxed and he didn't spell it out, and give up, or should I keep on asking? Now, we're not bothering HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So nothing wrong with asking if it's not a frivolous request and it's something that you feel you would use in your Avodas Hashem to help your friends and to help other Yidden and to help your family, and that could be parnasa, that could be other things as well. So the first rule is you don't have to ask for it. The second klal is, now we break this into two, the answer could very well be no, because either it's not good for you, and it's not one of the kelim you need in your Avodas Hashem, and it therefore would be damaging. It'll be more of an isayin, and therefore that's why you're allowed to stop. You don't have to stop because it's hard to know which one of these multiple choices is going to be, but it's possible that the answer is no because it's not good for you. The second part of that might be that it is good for you, but not yet. And Rav Dessler talks about this a lot, the changing levels of Bechira and the changing sets of Kalim, that you pass this Isayin, you might get a different set of Kalim, and maybe you have the right to ask for it, and be nice to continue, and ultimately you will be Zeicha to it when those circumstances present themselves, and they still need Tefillah to be able to bring it down. Otherwise we don't have to daven for anything. Just wait till Hashem's ready to give us the Kalim. So the answer could be no, it's not good for you, not now, not later. The answer could be it's not good for you now. It might be good for you at a certain time. And thank you. And the Third possibility might be that it's not good for you now and it'll be good for you later, but you need to dive in X amount of tefillas, and there's a number. We're not privy to what that number is, because that would make things easy. And not only do you need X amount of tefillas, but you also need X amount of schusim, and a lot has to happen to be zeicha to that particular bracha. And we will never know, because if we did, we'd be receiving nevuahs every day, and we're not on that madrega, and we don't have access to it. In terms of remaining relaxed and happy, Sameach B'chalka, so many people think Sameach B'chalka means in Gashmias, money. Sameach B'chalka just as much, I think it's Pashut, means in Ruchnias as well, even though we were all taught, and there are many Gemaras that support this, and all taught by Rabbeim that you should not be Sameach B'chalka. If you're learning X amount, you should add all the time and constantly push, and that's true. Let's say you're pushing, you're asking Kosh Baruch Hu for even more Havana and a greater ability and the ability to learn another 5 hours and to sleep for only 2, and the answer seems to be no. So in terms of being relaxed and happy, if you know you're trying your hardest and you're davening the right way and you're davening for the right reasons, and the answer is no right now, then you can be relaxed. The fact, point number 2, the fact that you don't really know if you're trying hard enough. It's hard to be honest with yourself. And you don't really know if your davening is on par, and there's always room for improvement over there. So this part gets people a little nervous, and we'll explain as we go along why there's nothing to be nervous about, because this is the Avodas Hashem in life. There's a common misconception, and you sometimes hear it echoed by good people, well-intentioned. And these expressions can be abi gesund, just as long as they're happy, all expressions like that. Like, if you ask them, just as long as they're happy, that's the main, what is your goal in life? So many people say to be safe, to be secure, to be financially secure, to be healthy, to be happy. Anybody who thinks about it for a moment, anybody who's from, who has a grounding in basic hashkafa, knows that all the things we just listed, although it's all over Shemana Esrei, we get daven for each and every one of them, and we do, that's a means to the end. Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha is a very, very important part of Asiyas mitzvahs. Being healthy is very important to be able to do more mitzvahs and have enough money to pay for everything. All these things are important. That's not what we're here for. That has to be stressed, because we as a community have been struggling for the last 4 months with, and we're not getting into this tonight. I've had 3 months of it, and I'll answer. I told them the next shayla I'm going to answer on this is in 10 years, and that's how long a break I need. But it's a schus. I think HaKadosh Baruch Hu every day it's healthy throughout, and I'm able to answer the shaylas. But Lamaisa, there is a balance between the focus on being healthy and staying healthy and living healthy, and then not forgetting to live. Is that simple enough? I'll leave it. You can all fight it out afterwards, what I meant by that, what that means. And that's not downplaying safety. And I just think we need a little bit more of a chizik, depending on, this person has no good or bad, they're all Heilige Yidden, everybody's good. But there are, as you've seen, different gradations on how much emphasis to put on one or the other, and not a criticism of either way. We just have to remember we have to be doing both. Yes, Nishmartem is an issue, making a panaso is an inyan, and Besimcha is an inyan. Lamaisa, a theme you find in any of the Baalei Musar, Rav Dessler says this over and over again, we'll see a few examples in a moment, is that we're here to pass Nisyanis. And we think of Nisyanis, Avinu had 10, and you ask a fellow, when's the last time you had any science? Oh yeah, I remember 2 months ago I had a very difficult science. There's a family member, Leilenu, that was ill, and there was a panos issue. We have to realize, and this shouldn't cause sadness, this should cause excitement, which should lead to contentment. That's the better translation of what Hashem wants in terms of simcha. And that is, you wake up in the morning, every minute of the day is an Nisayan. Every time you open your mouth is an Nisayan. What are you going to say? How are you going to say it? Are you going to accomplish something by saying it, or hurt somebody by saying it. And every time you spend money, is this baltashkis, is this chesed, is this tzedakah, is this bringing me closer to my goal in ruchni years, or am I spoiling my kids? Every single thing we do. So tell that to some people. I say, 100 nisanis a day? That sounds very disturbing. But it shouldn't. That's called living. And we have a right to daven. You don't have to daven for anything in particular unless it's basic. If you're a Avodas Hashem that you feel lacking, you should want to daven. You should not be able to wait till the next tefillah. And it should be an achrayus. One of the most interesting taiches. So Loi Dei Nisayin is we beg HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I have what I think I can handle. Please don't let my Averis and any Ketrugim Rachman Zlan create bigger Nisyanis. Every time you get into a rut and Ruchniyas, it creates another Malach, and you have now another Nisayin. It gets more difficult. So Loi Dei Nisayin means to remind ourselves that if you want to fight the Yetzer Hara, never fight head on. Stay 20 steps in front of him and don't meet him in the corner. Many people say, anybody could do that. You got to fight like a man. I said, let them fight like a man. We know a lot about the Yetzer Hara, and all the instructions are love a day nisayin, daven to stay away from him. Because once you're in his clutches, it doesn't really help to try to kick and scream and get out of it. So, lo daven nisayin is like davening for atal chaynein, to have chachma, to make the right decisions. And we have 1,000 decisions a day. We have to look at them all through the prism of what is important for my ruchnias, the ruchnias of my family and my community. And is this going to bring me closer or not? All our tefillah should be based on that. With all that, we have another possibility. And Michtam Eliyahu has quite a few pages on this particular sugya. He focuses on Chana. And that's why, obviously, this is going to be the first example. We're talking about, how long should I daven? So Chana waited decades. He's davening and davening and davening and davening for a child, and seemingly, per the shayl here, the answer seems to be no. Can I stop now? Well, she could have stopped. We wouldn't have tainas on her. She would have lost out in giving birth to Shmuel and Avi, and we possibly would have lost out on somebody of that madrega, of that caliber. And she continued and continued and continued. What triggered the success? Why is it punk this tefillah? She got a bracha of Meili, that helped, but that wasn't the whole story. What triggered that at this point she was successful? So it's a combination of, there's a number in Shamayim, how many tefillahs, and how much Mesiras Nefesh you have to go through, and she was suffering from Panino, mental L'Shem Shamayim, and she went through a lot to get there. And Rav Dessler says, at this particular point in Klal Yisrael's history, there needed to be a change because they had been in the period of the Shoftim for 350 years, and he brings down the Radak who holds the Pelegish Begiva, and Pesach Micha were at the end. That's Machlokes in Mefarshim. He goes with the Radak. The Radak says it's at the end they just had two disasters, Pelegish Begiva and Pesach Micha, and now they needed a king, and they needed a leader who can now transition from the Shoftim to appoint a Melech. And she acutely felt this chisaron in Klal Yisrael, and she felt the lack of covet for the Shechina, and she knew Klal Yisrael needed it. And now she davened, she says, I want somebody. Who do I want? So we would say, we would daven, we want a child. Okay, perfectly understandable. And we wouldn't falter for that. But his rayas, you can't argue with. First of all, she had the child. She promised beforehand she'd be Makdishim Lashem, and they didn't travel to the Mishkan back and forth by car. So as soon as he's able, like 3 years old, I'm going to bring him, and goodbye. Because she only had the schus to ask for it. She felt 20 years went by. Obviously, it's not really in my mazel to have it, and this is one of his many examples where the mazel could be changed by tefillah, and sometimes tefillah is needed, plus a dire need of somebody else that will give you the schus if you're really trying to help other people, which is an amazing concept that we can use. We might not be able to help all of Klal Yisrael at one time, but if you're davening and you really try to internalize that the extra money or the extra gesund and fact that you can go with less sleep because you're going to help more people, whatever you're asking for, if it's being used for your ruchnias, that's fine. Your ruchnias is helping other people. Every time you learn more, you're helping Klal Yisrael. Specifically, Chana felt that she's got to contribute to the next dar, and while she's asking, she wants the leader of the next dar who's going to have to change the whole mechanism of leadership. And she said, he's not mine, I'm going to give him away, which she did. And the Gemara Bracha says she wants, his Lashon, quotes the Pasuk in Asatel, Masechet Zera Anoshim, Zera Shemeshach Shnei Anoshim Shaul and David, or Zera Sheshakol Shnei Anoshim. That's quite a tefillah. I want a child, and not only do I want a child who's Shakol Keneged Moshe and Aaron. No, once you're asking, nothing wrong. Ask this guy. But she felt, or she had Siyata Shmaya to understand that there's something needed, and I'd like to have the schus to put it into place. And this, with all the Mesiras Nefesh, and all the crying, and all the davening, and X amount of time went by, and it was needed at this particular point in time, got her what she was asking for. That's his example, and that is a very, very unique way of looking at a bakasha, to make it beyond yourself, and to really, not fool yourself, but train yourself to understand whatever you're doing in Ruchnius helps other people by definition, and if you actually make plans to use it for other people, that will be another schus. If the answer is still no, either it's too much of an assignment for you and therefore you're not getting it for your own good, or it's not time yet and you need, or you have the option to keep going. That's example number one. Example number two. You know we're in big trouble where I see we're already 20 minutes into it and I only got the first shayla and I just skipped 4 pages. So that's why I keep coming back. Okay. Question number two. With a small item, I could really go till 12:01 because you all daven tonight already that you can go with less sleep, right? So we'll see how far we get. Question number two. What are my obligations of kiruv? Some of my friends are not doing that well and might not be a great influence on me, but I think I can really have a positive effect. It's a pretty loaded question. Sounds like it's from a bacher, but it can apply to an adult, a parent, a grandparent. And I picked this as number two because we're going to be talking about this theme of how to maximize our talents to spread it around and bring it to other people as well. So Moshe says, in a very fascinating tshuva, he talks about giving time for kiruv. And Moshe says that he thinks it should be similar to tzedakah. And even though the Mechaber says this is not well known, you ask anybody, how much tzedakah do you give? They say meiser, everybody knows the word meiser. Well, the Mechaber says the shear is actually chaimish, 20%. I've had many stares of disbelief. So you look it up. It's the first Mechaber in Hilchos Tzedakah. The shear is 20%, and then he says, b'diavad, if you gave 10%, you yetzi. Now, a lot of people can't afford 10%, so whatever they give, they yetzi because not mechuyev anymore. The guy seems to hold the 20% is a real din, and the 10% is b'diavad. Others say it's a hiddur, and the 10% is the ikar din, but those are the two numbers in Hilchos Tzedakah. So Moshe borrows that, and here he talks about the meiser, the 10%, and he talks about the 10% of your time. You got to figure out how much time you have in the first place, which is not that easy to do, and 10% of that. If you're qualified to do it, everybody's qualified on some level, it depends on your qualifications and how that mixes with the person you're trying to work on. A kiruv doesn't only mean kiruv for chaykim, it can mean kiruv for krevim, helping your friends who are from and helping them try to improve in a proper way where you're being yetzir without lacing into them, because that's not going to work nowadays. I always suggest you tell them, I've been working on the same problem for many years, which you probably have, and I struggle with it also. Why don't we work on it together and do it in a smart way where you get their cooperation and you help each other out. So, now Moshe suggests you should do it, again, be very careful with knowing your limits and knowing who you're dealing with, because of the risk involved. Now, how much of a risk can somebody take? The negative vibes you're getting from somebody else could bring you down. It's easier, unfortunately, to get brought down before you bring somebody else up, because the Yetzer Hara works over time. So if it's a bacher and they're very young, usually the incubation period of their original aliyah and solidification of their ruchnius is pretty important to hang around with Bnei Aliyah. You say, well, how can you tell everybody to hang around B'nai Aliyah? If there is an inertia that everybody is trying to hang around with B'nai Aliyah, that will hopefully have a upward pressure that everybody will try to be putting their best effort in. It works that way. If it becomes the in thing that everybody's trying to, and they don't want to associate, they'll be nice, they'll say good morning, they'll try to help out when they can, but depending on how impressionable somebody is, you have to be careful about the risk. What's the din if you are a lifeguard? And by a pool, it's pretty easy to jump in and get somebody laying if they need help. By a beach with an undertow and waves, or if a ship and high seas, not so easy. When you take a lifeguarding course, you learn that you have to, and they test you on this. I remember when I took it, they sent a guy who was 6 foot. I don't know what he was. I wasn't that tall then, and I wasn't very strong. Not then, not now. And I saw him and was turned back. Like 300 pounds, 6'5", 6'6". That's the guy they sent out. I told the head of the program afterwards, and I said, with friends like you. He says, no, I want to make sure you really know what you're doing. So if anybody's ever taken a course and passed it, he's supposed to feign like he's panicking. And he's going to use you as a flotation device, and you got to flip him over, get him under control, and schlep him back to shore. That's not so easy. So there's always some risk involved. What's the din? Well, we obviously know the din is we have lifeguards, and we allow people to go swimming even at beaches, so it's got to be mutter, both for the lifeguard and for the swimmers. Why is it mutter? There's a risk involved. And they're doing it for relaxation, exercise. The answer is we allow minimal risk, and if somebody is in trouble, we allow you to put yourself at some harm's way to be able to get them under control and in a safe place. How much risk? So it's actually Machlekes the Bavli and Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi says if somebody's in trouble, you got to take huge risks. Ain't safek mitzvah midei vadai. If you do nothing, he's not going to make it. And if you do something, maybe he will. Obviously, send somebody who knows how to swim well and is trained for this if you can. The Bavli, it's a shaila where that Bavli is, but the Bavli seems to hold not so. The reason we know that is because the Beis Yosef brings down the Yerushalmi. If you have Yerushalmi and there's no Bavli that argues, passing like the Yerushalmi. So Beis Yosef, he talks about in Yonei Shmiras HaNefesh. And Hatzalah, he says, the Yerushalmi says, you got to do something. It's dangerous, but if you don't do something, it's very dangerous. And in the Mechaber, he doesn't bring it down, which is rare. So between the Beis Yosef and the Mechaber, he wrote the same thing. He decided there was a Bavli that argues. And halacha l'maisa, we paskin that you're allowed to take some risk because that's the nature of the fireman or the lifeguard or whoever's on duty. And even if you're not trained and paid for this, but you think you know what you're doing, also we hold there's a big mitzvah l'sam adam re'echa, and we allow a bigger risk than climbing a tree without scaffolding equipment for a lulav and esrog. We take no risks over there. You got the professionals do it, and it's only a mitzvah. It's a minute before Sukkot, so don't climb the tree. When it comes to saving lives, we're willing to take some risk, but not like the Yerushalmi's mashma 30, 40, 50% risk. We'll take something under a miyira matzu, or at a miyira matzu, 10%, 15%, whatever the case may be. Interesting shaila you can clear when it comes to kiruv kravim, there's some risk involved always. You can hear some insane things and some kfira and some negativity. There's always some risk. Would we allow as much risk as we do in a physical saving of somebody's life? Maybe we should allow more because I'm saving his ruchnias, that's more important. Or maybe less because right now, if I don't do anything, the guy is never going to die. Whereas in ruchnias, it doesn't have to be my issue right now, and we're struggling with something, hopefully we'll get somebody better trained. And it's a very individual shayla, but Rabbi Moshe says there is a chiyuv to take time to learn with people. You don't have to discuss philosophy. That's less risky. When it comes to debating issues, there's always some risk involved, but I tell people kiruv is a very, very chashuv thing, and the schus is off the charts. If the person is too young and the person is dealing with a friend who is obviously same age, a big influence, you got to be extra careful. And you can mention it to Rabbeim, you can mention it to other people who might be able to handle it. But Lamaisa, chayecha kaidmin, I think the argument is stronger in Ruchnius. As important as Kiruv is, it has to be done with certain rules and regulations in place. Interesting Raya Ladavar. There's a Picket Rabbi Lezer that talks about the tshuva process of Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish, we know, was a highway robber, head of a gang, and he had describes there him and his two friends, and every night they went down to the crossroads and met people and explained to them that it's worthwhile for them to give to their cause, because otherwise it could get messy. It never says Reish Lakish, even in those years, hurt anybody, but he was, speaking of 6'5", and he was an imposing figure, and I don't know if he was, but he was strong. And Lamaisa, they made a lot of money, and the Medrash describes that after a couple of years of doing this, he started thinking about life, and he wasn't really happy. Of course, he couldn't be happy. He's a Pintel Yid. And he snuck out of the cave in the wee hours of the morning, per your question of law of a day Nisayan. Why did he sneak out of the cave? He should tell his friends, okay, guys, this is ridiculous. This is not a nice thing for a good Jewish boy. And Bugsy Siegel would agree with that in the Elam Emes, even though he was in that line of work. And I'm leaving, and I think you should come with me. He didn't do that. He understood these are his close friends, and there's going to be a discussion, and it's 2 against 1, and they might talk him out of it. So he slipped out of the cave, and then he met Rabbi Yochanan, jumped into the lake, offered assisted marriage, became a Talmud Chaver, and the rest is history. Did you ever wonder, the end of that picket, Rabbi Lezer says that after many decades, Reish Lakish died the same day they died, separate shmooze. That's a remez to the fact that they all had the same keichus and the same longevity, and the other 2 friends could have done it, they just didn't think about it enough. And Reish Lakish's neshama goes to Gan Eden, and the other 2 go to Shol Tachtiyas, which is the lashon of the Piket Rabbi Lezer. Did you ever wonder, did Reish Lakish go back afterwards to try to bring them back? So I don't know what happened in later years when he became the Amira Reish Lakish, but in the initial years, I could be sure that he probably asked Rabbi Yochanan, I feel bad. This is really, now I'm living. And I have 2 friends who are still up to no good. Should I spend my 10%? What Moshe says in the Tshuva, 10% for Kir. Rabbi Yochanan said, later. And he probably tried it later, and it didn't work, even though Reish Lakish was very convincing. And Rabbi Yochanan himself said that at this stage of your life, you can't do it. The reason I'm mentioning this is because through our tefillas, I mentioned Tachan, which is the Hagdama, we're always looking for hadracha. We're looking for ways to use our kelim and ways to use them safely. And we always have to look again and recalibrate if we're not using it to the fullest. And if we could be helping somebody, helping them with the ruchnius and doing chesed with them, we have an achrayus to do so. Moshe says so. But it has to be done safely. And Rav Dessler says, shtickle al pi Kabbalah, but I'll mention it quickly. You should see it inside. It's breathtaking, this whole pshat. But Acher, we know, is Elisha ben Avi is the only Tana who went off the derech. He lived at a time, the worst time of the Shmat, the Romans. He's under a lot of pressure. He cracked. Taisus brings the Yerushalmi that when he was in yeshiva, he was actually listening to Gaisha music and had philosophy books, Greek philosophy books on his lap under his Gemara. He was smart enough to ace every bechina, and he still was reading the philosophy books. He didn't go off the derech then, but the foundation was shvach, and then his father promised that he would dedicate him to Torah because he saw the fireworks the Rabbanim were making as they were sitting at the table to bris, which was shaloi lishma. There were some cracks in the foundation. When the going got tough, he cracked. And he went really off. Rameir went to learn with him. Rameir's chaverim had tainas. He said, I'm just taking the fruit very carefully, leaving the pits, which only Rameir could do. Is a shaila lahalacha, whether you're allowed to do that. Some places say we don't pass like that, and some say we do, but only if you're Rameir. So it's not negayah to us. So Rameir felt horrible for him, and he was always trying, and I'll tell us, they're walking one day, and it was Shabbos, and Acher, who was still an Eloi and remembered everything, even though he was Machal Shabbos before Hesia, he was walking with Rameir, and he stopped all of a sudden, and he says, Rameir, you have to stop Ad Kan Tchum Shabbos. So you have to stop. I'm continuing. So he had enough respect, at least for our mayor. They had a very close relationship. When he died, Rav Meir begged him, Chazar Bach, and he cried, and Rav Meir says, I think there was some Yehuri Tshuva. Lamaisa, when the Neshama went to the Beis Din Shamayla, which happened a second later, if that long, so this the first and last time the Beis Din Shamayla didn't exactly know what to do. Usually, unfortunately, there are only very two clear-cut directions, and it's not much of a suffix. They know what to do because his Kayach HaTorah, so they couldn't put him in Gehenna, is too much Torah. And they couldn't put him in Gan Eden because he was Machal Shas V'Hes, he was an Apikaris, he used to go into yeshivas and take Bachrim and take them out of yeshivas. It was bad. But his Kayach HaTorah, you understand, if his Talmud is Armer, you get an idea of who Elisha ben Avuya was. So, he was in limbo. And Rav Meir felt so bad, he said, they got to let him into Gehenna, otherwise he's never going to get a kapara. So he said, when I die, I'm going to make sure he gets into Gehenna. That's a Talmud. Sort of, I guess, if you look at it that way. It's better than being out in the cold. And he said, Rai Ladavar, when I die, you will see smoke coming out of his kever. And Rav Meir died, and there was smoke coming out of the kever the next day. Gavaldik, he went to Gehenna. Don't quote this out of context. But so far, so good. And Rabbi Yochanan, who was 2 days later, Rabbi Yochanan was a Talmud of Rebbe, who was a Talmud of Rav Meir. But he had a shaykhus to Acher, because the terror came through this line. And he made a comment, it's all Gemara Chagig on Tezvav. His lashon over here, he wasn't tining a Rav Meir. Rabbi Yochanan, Guvrasa Lameka Rabbi Benera, is it a Gevura to have your Rebbe burnt? Now he didn't have a tain of Rav Meir. He said, it's a tain on us. We should do more. That's the first step. But it's 2 days already. We got to do something. So Rabbi Yochanan said, when I die, the smoke's going to stop. And he died, and the smoke stopped. Why? Because Rabbi Yochanan said, as quoted in this Gemara, when I die, I'm going to take him by the hand, and he's coming to me, with me, to Olam Haba. Rabbi Yochanan wasn't on it, but he knew where he was going. And I'm going to hold him by the hand, let somebody stop me. Pretty bold. And the smoke stopped. So Dessler wants to know what exactly was, no, machlekes, what was Rav Meir doing? Why couldn't Rav Meir do that? Why did Rav Meir take him by the hand? Rav Meir. He says Rav Meir in the element of Shammuz couldn't get that close. This is my interpretation of a very deep Inyan and Kabbalah. I think this is what the Milton was getting to, but he couldn't get that close to him Be'elam Hazeh because it was dangerous. Because he was still learning from him, but like his Chaverim said, this is too dangerous, and he's going to have a bad effect on you. And Yeruchnius, Rav Meir said, I have to know myself, I do know myself, I can handle it, and he did handle it. And there was no ill effect. But he couldn't get that close. And that echoed in the Elam Shamas, so he couldn't take him by the hand and bring him back up. What can he do? What can he accomplish? He says, I can accomplish that when I go there, they'll let him into Gehenna, because what is Gehenna? That's a good question. There are many answers to that. What is Gehenna? Gehenna is the suffering when you see what you're missing in your ruchnias. You see the distance in you and the Shekhinah. Now, I hope none of you are smiling when you hear that. Oh, that's what it is. Baruch Hashem. I don't know if you're smiling, Jay. I couldn't tell. But that's not good news. Picture the most jealous moment you ever had in your life and multiply it by 20 million. So you're not jealous of anybody in particular, that too, but you're angry at yourself. I want to come to the Shekhinah. They're not letting me anywhere near. That's the worst pain possible. Adessa says Acher didn't have that pain because he had so much sipuk from his Torah. He didn't feel that pain. He did all sorts of averas, but he had so much Torah, he didn't feel the pain because he had that sipik and ruchnis. So automatically you're learning Torah, you're learning about the Shekhinah. So he had that attachment. This is an amazing concept. So he couldn't go to Gehenna, he couldn't experience Gehenna. So our mayor says, when I go, I will fix that because I lived in his dar. I was his Talmud. I was there by the Shmad. I was there by all the horrible things that are going on by the Romans, and I was also under pressure. And I stayed firm. And when he sees me, and he sees my neshama, he'll understand that he's taka missing something, that he could have done it also. And that'll be his Gehenna, and then things will get moving. Comes up Yechon after a couple of days, he says, okay, that's a lot of Gehenna. I can go get close to him because I had no danger in life, and therefore I could take him by the hand and I can now bring him up. That shows you the achrayus and caring for people, how we have to I'm using the word kiruv, but kiruv means just every morning getting somebody excited about their learning, getting somebody to come to davening, getting somebody to pick you up. I don't want to give away all the secrets because then you'll know how I'm trying to convince other people. But if you have a friend who's not showing up to Minyan on time, not just once or twice, like for the last 25 years. So if nothing you said worked and you happen to be better at it, everybody's wired differently. So maybe, say, I really need help over here. Can you pick me up? Now that resonates better in Muncie because you have to be picked up to go somewhere. He said, no, I live down the block. I don't take my car. I can't find parking. So that might not work here. But think of something to draw him in. You're not putter. And draw the lines where it's becoming a chisaron in you when you're hearing things and watching things that are affecting you and you can't be misgaber. That's when it gets too risky. And you have to say, I can help, but I can't put myself and my family at risk. This is a decision we make with our children all the time and with ourselves. And this insight with Rameh and Rabbi Yochanan shows you how complicated it is. So that is one small aspect of our obligations in Kiruv and the risks associated. Let's go to the third question. This is similar to the first in terms of davening, but very apropos for the times. I have been very on edge and not as productive as I'd like to have been during the corona pandemic. Unfortunately, I think we can all say that to some degree. It's been difficult. And I still feel that I will be in limbo for the foreseeable future. Perhaps a half a year, a year and a half. What if they do not find a vaccine? What if it doesn't work? What if they don't have enough? What if the virus mutates? The question goes on. Now you might say, this guy is really bent out of shape. I can't tell you how many times I hear this a day from very normal people. So what can we tell ourselves? And I think everybody is nervous. Everybody's still on edge. And Kadosh Baruch Hu can have it disappear as quickly as it appeared. Yad Hashem tiksa. Hashem could send a vaccine. Hashem could, Rahman Zlan, not Hashem. Can mutate. There's so many possibilities. And this goes back to, we mentioned at the beginning, there's living safely, and there's due diligence, and there's nishmartem, and there's all the good things that you could do. And there's also living. And this person who asked this question, and the 100 others who asked similar questions are quite normal, good people, from people normally functioning pretty well. And how do you start dealing with this? Because if we don't deal with it better, our children, who, they're going to be probably books and studies written on this, the effect of, and it's, I can hear, it could be an issue, the effect of a very pressurized situation on children who were in their developmental stage. I'm still in the developmental stage, and maybe most of you are also, so it has an effect on everybody. And I knew in mid-April when my grandson, who was all of 7 then, 7.5 I guess, talk about optimism. Did you ever do this study? I have this in shul all the time. You ask a kid under 10 how old he is. He'll give you fractions and fractions upon fractions. I'm 7 3/4 and 7 7/8 and 7. It sounds like he's trading the stocks or something like that. He's almost 8. And then when I talk to anybody like over 50, they start rounding down by decades. So, okay, I get that. That's fine. But my 6-year-old grandson came in and he said, I see him all the time. He's talking to his younger brother. And his younger brother must have mentioned the word corona. And I heard him giving heavy musar. He says, you mentioned that word one more time? Okay. He was giving them over the head. I don't think he fathomed exactly what, but he really got upset. So yes, it could it can have an effect, and the only way to temper this is going back to the basics of bitachon and amunah. And I'd like to mention two things. There's so much to say about this, but it's a very practical question. I feel like I'm in limbo, like I can't make plans. I can't, what's going to be? So the same people that called me with these shaylas about getting married and getting engaged and having Zoom dates and going out and not going out and going in, and I got some very interesting yichud shaylas from people who were going out in places that were taka yichud shayla, because they couldn't go to restaurant, they couldn't go to a hotel, and they couldn't go to, and rightfully so, and they're not interested, and I told them, you can't go because it's not safe, and it's going to be a chil Hashem, no one's out, and so there are a lot of people in Klal Yisrael doing chesed with their various shops and businesses and the like, and which I, up to page like 1700 just on the unique COVID shayla, but the same Hilchos Yichud and all these, but they just have an interesting twist. I mean, why would somebody call for help with Yichud shayla from a hardware store? Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? But it does if you understand the context. So I think most people intuitively understood that after the first week or two, this is not going away so quickly, and you need to live, and you have to figure out how to get this balance. So where do we have this in history? The good news is, very good news, you look in Chumash, everything's there, obviously. And not only is it there, but it's very highlighted. There's a very famous Ramban. The Ramban wants to know, why is it that we have Tilei Tzalam Shal Halachas on an extra Yud, on a Halach Machi Sinai, and a Remez, and then we have Ma'asav V'Sim Labanim, we have 100 Psukim, a different shmooze. Why? That's the Iker in Amunah, is following your Rebbe's direction and your master's direction and the direction of HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'chvod B'atzma, even though it goes against everything you stand for. And Eliezer's whole chukkan in life was to marry into the family, and the answer was loy with an aleph, per our first question. Daven, 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 daven. The answer is no. And he was Avram Avinu's Rosh Hashiva. They're very, very close. And he brought up the shidduch, he starts straightening out his tie. So, how's the time? I've been waiting decades for this. And then Avram Avinu says, yeah, go to my hometown in a far-off land, because it's, sorry to say, not going to be you. I'm going to go to my family because they're good, solid of the Avodah Zarah. I'm just raising the, he didn't say it like that, but the Drosha Saran asked that kasha. And talk about crushing defeats. Like, this is, he's looking forward and davening his whole life. This was a loy with an aleph, and you can't explain it, because, what do you mean? I'm the Rosh Hashiva. My daughter grew up in this house. The yeshiva's over here. They're a bunch of Avdei Avodah Zarah. And what the Drosha Saran answers to this, if you can explain it to me fully, I don't, my chisaron, of course, I don't really understand what the answer is, but there's something to do with the inherent good traits of the family, which is got to be the answer. Shaila is, what does that mean? Because they were Avdei Avodah Zarah, and then Lavan tried to poison him. That's Avodah Zarah and Ritzicha. And then Besul was up to other things. That's Gili Arayas. So it's a Chiddush Nifla, but Zui Darkish Latera, you try to understand the sugi as best as you can. And then Eliezer's Godless is, Avram Avinu is my Rebbe, and this is what he said, and that's the answer, because that's the Dvar Hashem. That was his Nisayon. In the Midbar, Klal Yisrael gets out of Mitzrayim. So the next time, and this is a running theme, is that whenever you have many, many Pesukim seem to be saying the same thing, obviously it's representing something that's very, very central to Yiddishkeit. What is that? So the Ramban says, why does the Pasuk give us such a long account of the Masos? The Aron got up, and the Aron rested, and they followed the Aron, and then they encamped, and then they parked themselves, and then they got going, and it repeats it over and over and over again. So Ramban wants to know, why is this so important? Because say once, they follow the Aron. And number two, Haladavahu. Each family had like 97 children. Can you imagine just packing up the linen, forget the rest of their clothing? And the mother's in charge with, I assume, some help from some of the older kids, but still packing and unpacking. And they're following direction. They're told by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just follow the Anon. That's the representative of the Shechina, and just follow direction. So Ramban spells out that they had to learn at the inception of Klal Yisrael's nationhood, the beginning of their Avodas Hashem, that the entire theme of life is following directions, whether we understand, whether we don't, whether we find it easy, whether we find it difficult. And when we find it difficult, Hashem is doing us a favor to give us more schar, and it's all in the Amelus, Lapum, Tzara, Agra. And we Americans don't do well with this theme, even though, like, we just touched up Yiddishkeit in like one sentence. We don't do well with it because everything's got to be comfortable, and Baruch Hashem, it has been comfortable, and Baruch Hashem, we're secure, and Baruch Hashem, despite everything that's going on, it's never been more secure, and despite what's going on in the streets and in politics, it's still better than it ever was, but we're not used to this. So go explain to people, I wasn't born during the war, not even shortly afterwards, but I was able to spend 45 years with my grandparents who were. And I'm not saying they didn't take it seriously. This is a serious danger. We got to be careful. But they said, like, all this, it's not me speaking. These are people who lived in Europe, and they're not even talking about the Holocaust. The one I'm quoting wasn't around during COVID, but there's something similar, and they said one day in Europe, one morning in Europe before any Holocaust, was more than any of the Americans can handle in a lifetime. So to understand that we're a little bit weak due to the great midas chesed that Hashem knows what we can and can't handle, and therefore we have the biggest shefa and bracha and chesed after World War II and after our experience in Europe, because how much can you handle? With that said, we're still here to understand that it's not supposed to be easy. We ask for non-Nisyanis, we ask for peace, security, health, and everything else, and we should ask for it, and Ken Yirbu should continue to be as gold tzedek. But Lamaisa, if that's causing us to look at Ruchnias like we look at our easy chair, and that if it doesn't happen as easy as plopping down, kicking the thing up, and falling to sleep quickly with some music in the background and all the kids in the seventh bedroom, if our Ruchnias now becomes something that if it's very easy, I'll do it, and if it's not, I'm not interested, then we need to ask for Mashiach even quicker, because it has a very, very bad effect on Amelus. And the Ramban says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is never out to give us a difficult time. That goes without saying. It's even a chutzpah to say it like that. But the Ramban has such a lashon. And he says that the reason they had what we would call, looks like a haphazard travel schedule. And the pasuk spells it out. Sometimes they'd go and they'd pitch their tents, unpack, which took 5 days. And then the morning of day 6, the Anon would start going up, and they said, I can't believe it, the Anon's going up. Okay, pack everything up. They listened, Baruch Hashem, about all the complaining in the midbar. They listen. We understand a little bit more why they're complaining. It's a long trip, and the lechem akilokel. HaKadosh Baruch was trying to train them, the Ramban says. What was the training? The training was, you can't get used to living and having Avodas Hashem on an easy chair. So even though they had mud falling and they had the Anonim surrounding them and they were safe and secure and the enemy attacked and the missiles never came in and they had all the food and water they needed, but it was always just enough, the mud fell just enough, you couldn't store anything. Did you notice they're complaining about water a lot? Because apparently they have the water and then they don't have water the next day. You'll say, well, what's with these people? They had water yesterday, the day before. Don't they know Hashem has a good track record? I don't know if any of you ever traveled through the Sinai. I did. I was 12 years old, I think. And I don't even know if I was very deep into the Sinai. Probably not. But, you know, the guy who was driving the Jeep said we're going to the Sinai. I looked around. I was never, and I wasn't scared to go. I went on and I packed my canteen. You go prepared for these things. And all of a sudden, like 3 minutes into the drive, there's nothing around but sand dunes. So I start asking him, how far is the 7-Eleven from here? So he keeps muttering something, these crazy Americans. And I had my canteen, and he informed me there was no Slurpees along the way. And he kept driving, and we went further and further and further in. I saw more, I caught a couple of cactuses. And I have my canteen, and I'm drinking, and my canteen is low. I'm happy I had the experience, because I never had it again, and never had it before. Anybody ever here worried where the next drink of water was coming from? I ran out of water, by the way. And I was afraid he was going to get lost. He said, No problem. I know exactly where I'm going. He couldn't know where he's going because there's no GPS and every sand dune looked the same. But he got us back and I'm here today, I'm happy to say. But haladavahu. So Ramban says they're packing and unpacking, and what happened the next time? So after unpacking for 5 days, they get going and they listen, they're troopers. And then the honor goes a little bit, it stops. And then I can picture the husband comes home and said, we've been here already half a day, why don't you unpack? So, oh, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not unpacking. This time, the honor can leave any time, I'm not unpacking. And then they would stay in that spot for like 4 years. So why would Hashem do this? Hashem is always there to help us. The answer is if we don't get trained that life isn't always, you could daven for it. That's the question we started with. You could daven for peace and security, Yishuv Adas, we should daven for it. But understand that in life, it takes many different forms, but there's always going to be something distracting you and something weighing on you. And if you wait to start your Avodas Hashem and really get into your learning when everything is over, or you wait to make your plans and everything is over, it's never going to work. And not picking on Bacharim, but the Yetzer Hara picks on them more than anybody else because they're public enemy number one, because they're learning all day. And we all know, we have a lot of Bacharim who are wearing long pants now. But if you remember that far back, I do, because I remember 8th grade was probably right before my running with the sand dunes. And remember, you spent a lot of time, 8th grade, tumulting about Masifta. And then you spend a lot of time in 9th grade discussing whether you should be switching. And then in 12th grade, you're tumbling about this. Some of that's natural. But you don't want to waste time worrying about each step. More than that, because you got to live in the present. Chavetz Chaim was famous for saying, the block Gemara in front of you is all that exists in the world. Concentrate on that block. Your Daven Shemona Esrei, concentrate on the next bracha, not even the whole Shemona Esrei. That's all you have, and ignore everything else. Without that, we can't produce as much as we want. And the Ramban says that's why they had to get used to already in the Midbar, that you think you know the plans, as soon as you're settled, Hashem will ask you to move, so you get used to it. And as soon as you want to move, and you want to move on, and you're unsettled, and you're bent out of shape, Hashem will keep you there for 4 years. That training came already in the Midbar, and we have to go back to look at these parshas. Otherwise, you can't wait a half a year waiting for a shoe to drop. And I also counsel people, like every hour in the hour, people with this form of question in panic mode. Again, these are good, normal people. I said, how often are you looking at the news? One guy said, I promise I don't look at it more than every 15 minutes. Promise, that was already good. I said, every 15 minutes? He says, yeah, it used to be a lot worse. I cut it back. You won't be normal. If everything is the next thing, we're going to second wave and a third wave and a fourth wave. It's good to be careful and know a little bit what's going on, but who has time to do that? You're supposed to be learning then, or you're supposed to be working then, something else that will benefit. It's not good for your health. And it also runs counter to the Ramban and to every other lesson learned in Chumash. So the answer to this question is nobody knows. There is a vaccine, they'll have enough, the virus mutates, the whole thing will go away very quickly. We don't know what Hashem has in store, but we do know that all this is training, because COVID out of the picture completely amidst Hashem. Regular life, we're doing this too often. Every stage of life, we're spending a tremendous amount of time worrying about the next stage, instead of worrying about the mitzvah right in front of you, the tefillah right in front of you, the chesed right in front of you, and the blot gemara right in front of you. We only have a few minutes left, so we're going to skip another 20 pages, and I'm just going to get to a few quick summer halachas, which, if I say quick enough, will leave everybody in complete disarray, and I guess will be food for thought. So we'll start with the food for thought. The number one shaila, which I'm unhappy that I didn't receive more, used to be most of June, every single child from 8 and up would ask me this shaila. Unfortunately, this year camp was very complicated and not everybody went, so I got the shaila less. But those who had asked me in other years, said they're re-asking because they finally found a way to go to camp, but they're stuck in some hotel somewhere and they have very little room, and therefore they're re-asking. The shaila was in past years, and now, when I get there, can I put the food under my bed? So you all know we don't put food under the bed. To the extent of not putting food under the bed, we don't even know whether, but the we should eat the food. That place can say, yeah, that place can say not. Baltashkas, the Shadvan is deraisa, so there's more into Mekel. Put in a box seal doesn't really help too much. One sheet holds it does, most sheets holds it doesn't. But I found it interesting, the people were asking now, I'd asked before, I said, don't you remember what I said last year and the year before? I said, yeah, but we have now even less room, because we're not in our regular campus. They finally figured out, after 20 years, they found a place to put it, and now they're not there anymore. Okay, so I proposed just something to think about. The last young man to ask me, I mentioned this a few years back. I said, you know, a lot has changed from when I went to camp, and it wasn't that long ago. When I went to camp, first of all, the bungalows didn't have air conditioning. I'm not saying all of them have now, and I'm not accusing anybody of such gashmias, but when yesteryear they had camp, they had what you can maybe call a canteen, but they weren't making hamburgers and hot dogs every night and serving pizza with two different areas in the cafeteria for fleischiks and milchiks. And the canteen sold a couple of things if you got lucky, and we brought food. I said, why are you bringing food? I picked this question. I have 50 of them here. I picked this question because there's a mussar behind it also. Don't put the food under the bed. And it's a serious shaila. It's an Inyan Peak Kabbalah. But brought down, like, we don't put food on the bed, and it's not healthy. Lamaisa, why is everybody bringing so much food? The answer is the old man syndrome, the same thing. Madachal. So I asked him, I said, I happen to know in your camp they have a canteen that would put the catering service in the Helmsley Palace to shame. So he said, what's the Helmsley Palace? I said, you're really young. So he said, yeah, it's very expensive. I said, very expensive? You're paying your own way? I was already getting impressed. He said, no, but I once came home with a bill that had many zeros on it from the canteen. And my father mentioned maybe next summer you'll bring some of it up. I said, okay, let's keep it of an aim issue. We'll have to find a place to put it. That's not where it's coming from. It's coming from the mindset is I'm not blaming them. We have to have the food in the freezer and the second freezer, and we have to store up. And then, as you all experienced in the last few months, the beginning, people storing up is not the word, because they thought the sky was falling in. And I can't tell you how many people have called me and asked about the shaylas of pulling back on the meiser, not because they don't have a job, because they want to spend an enormous amount of money stocking up. This is already a few months in where it's pretty clear to me, and I unfortunately have to look at the news, not every 15 minutes, but I know what's going on. I said, I assure you, there is not going to be a problem with the food chain. At that point, it was pretty posh. So he said, no, he just heard a fresh rumor 15 minutes ago, because he's only looking at every 15 minutes, that there might be a problem with the meat. I said, even Lu Yitzur is a problem with the meat. What happened to all the cans of salmon and all the matzah and everything else he brought into the house? He said, I can't eat that all the time. Meat? So, Baruch Hashem, we live in a wonderful, affluent, free society, and we have to thank Hashem every day for it. We also have to keep in mind that a lot of these questions come from the fact that we're very pampered. I'm not excluding myself. And we're not going up 20 madregas in this regard, but the short-term goal is to at least get the convenience factor. Everything we created in the world today, every gadget, is to save you time, which it never does. We've never had less time as a society. And to save you the schlep, and to make it more convenient. So this guy told me, I never heard the word before, this is years back. He says he's got this new chair. That's why I'm picking on the easy chair. I'm thinking of him. I have an easy chair in my house. I'm not saying I sit in it, but I would in theory if I had time. And he said it's good. It's really geschmack. Every Leil Shabbos he goes and he slurns in it. I said, you what? He said, I slurn in it. I said, excuse my Amaratzis. I know a little English, a little Lashon HaKodesh, a little Aramaic. What's that? He says, well, that's when you sit in it and you sort of like sleep and learn at the same time. I learned a new word. So that's very American. That we can have our cake and eat it too. And Rav Dessler and every other one of the Baalei Musar just quote Gemara after Gemara, that we're here to work, and if you really want to be happy, you work hard. That's the from version of no pain, no gain. But no pain, no gain is a real hashkafa. You can't accomplish anything, not in Gashmias, and certainly not in Ruchnias, unless you understand that every Nisayan, even though your initial question is we try to avoid them. Yes, we do. We should daven every day to avoid them because we have enough on our plate. But the ones we're dealing with understand that you're here to conquer this, and that takes focus and work. It need not be panic. And you don't have to think of the Nisayan tomorrow and next year and what's going to be down the line. You have to think of the Nisayan right in front of you. And if you're sweating a little bit for the Nisayan right here and you understand that it's an exciting opportunity, and excitement speaks to you in terms of accomplishing and contentment, then you're beginning to understand the chesed elyon of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us all the time in terms of the choices we have, the bechira we have, and the excitement in trying to be mezgaber on a lot of the things that are built into such a society. I will end with the other example, which I'm not going to address now, but please remind me next year. There's a great sport, one of the only sports, if you call it that, that's great for social distance in camps, because I think the original rule, which nobody keeps, and that's part of the problem, is you have to be at least 6 feet away. And that is the sport where everybody goes and they spend the afternoon shooting their friends in paintball. So the good news is it's not basketball or football. You don't have to hug the guy. You don't have to stand over him. It's pretty good for in a COVID situation. The problem is that I've been asked the Shaila many times, and enough people told me about it that one of the few things before they asked, I told them there are far better things hashkafically and halachically that you could do with your afternoon. If you're an avid fan, if you want to know what it's all about, talk about Shaloah Asani Goy. They're magazines, probably one of the most kosher magazines you can ever see, because it's all, well, I can't say it's all men. I don't look at the magazines. I can't vouch for that. But it's basically a war magazine, people dressed in khakis. It's all about rifles and people shooting people and strategy and how to take over. And I understand capture the flag. I was in camp also, as I mentioned. So that's fine. I understand touch football, okay. Tackle football, similar Shaila, it's a bit dangerous without equipment. Shooting at people already, even though they say they're doing it in good fun, I've interviewed hundreds of people who played it pretty seriously, and they say that the good news is we're friendly before, we're friendly after. During the game, it gets pretty vicious. And I said, but the rule is nobody's supposed to get hurt. The rule is you're supposed to be shooting at X distance. And every time I mention that, they give me a look like, nobody does that. That's no fun. What you do is when the guy's about to surrender, you close in on him at point blank range. And I gave a shiur one time at camp about this, and the head counselor came over to me and said, did you know that that tonight, this afternoon, we're going on a major paintballing thing. We're going to have light at the night. It's going to start in the afternoon. It's the whole plan. It's going to be a war game at night, a day. You got a whole elaborate plan. Did you know that? I said, honestly, I didn't. Somebody had asked me the Shaila. I guess that's why he asked me. So I said, well, I guess you're not canceling the trip now. I said, there's an incident, so chavolos atzma, and you can't be moichel. The Gemara has 3 makaris, achas dimchem and ashosechem, a makar from Nazir, that the Nazir has to bring a carbon just for a kapar from Mazir from Yayin, which isn't too difficult, especially for me. It doesn't drink the stuff. But even for people who do, not even chavala. And baltashchis, you can't be chayvi yourself. Ramesha struggles with taking a blood test, with giving blood. Take a blood test for medical needs. One of the shayas we didn't get to is, I had a doctor in the shul who's very close to me and kept asking me, did you take a blood test? I said, what for? I'm busy dealing with the shayas, everybody else's blood test. He said, why don't you find out if you have antibodies? I said, I don't like being anti-anybody, that's first of all. And second of all, I never had it. Why should I have it? So he said, no, it could be a myla. If you're giving plasma, it's a myla. You need an excuse. You can't just go take a test. Ramesha says you can't even give blood. He has an excuse. The guy was getting paid, and maybe he has a whole long tshuva to explain it. He has a simple blood test, a prick, and that's it. Akadei kach. Anybody who tells you in paintball they're not doing chavola either never saw the game or plays it and is lying. I'm talking about huge welts. And anybody who doesn't have any welts either hid behind the bushes the whole time because he's a coward, or has such a sharp shot that he killed everybody else and nobody got near him. More than 2. So I gave the shiur. I said, look, you're not calling enough. They're calling enough. I happened to be standing in the parking lot. This happened a number of years ago. A good camp. They meant well. From people. I think it's the last time they played. I happened to be standing in the parking lot. All of a sudden, 4 buses come back. And I said, Mamish my mazel, I'm here to greet the war veterans. So they get off the bus. I wasn't in Vietnam, but if I was, that's what it looked like. They had two guys getting off on crutches. They had guys with bandages around that, I kid you not. I said, what happened? He said, Rebbe, he says, next time I'm going to ask you for a bracha, not a klala. He says, it was a disaster. I said, it was mamish bad. He said, yeah, we lost. That was really what was bothering him. But of course they had. Well, you can't, if you fire from this range, the paintball explodes. This is, if it's good, and it hurts. And there's not one person who didn't admit to me after cross-examination that yes, it hurts, but don't worry, Rebbe, it's only a short-term sting, and the welt goes down after a week or two, nothing to worry about. I said, yeah, except for the sugin baba kama about being chayvul other people than yourself. So, on the one hand, that's the only sport today that you're supposed to social distance, and you could shoot from afar. Maybe this will bring back the sport, because now we have a heter if you really shoot from far. But I think it's a serious problem. I think hashkafically, the whole excitement of shooting at people is not lefi ruchenu. We were never good at war. It's a problem with Shalom and Amalek. We're never good at this. Maybe sometimes we have to be, sometimes not. We're not good at this, and we don't want to get good at this. One guy tried, said, yeah, but in case we ever need it, I got to know what I'm doing. I said, you're not going to be handling a paintball rifle. He says, it's more or less the same. I said, that I agree with. So we'll have to find a different sport to socially distance. I think Frisbee has to be brought back. So if anybody knows what the rules are, let me know. Keep up the good work, and Mitzvah Hashem, we have to mechazik ourselves, mechazik other people, and worry about the Blat Gemara in front of us, and we'll be okay. Thank you for listening. Okay.
Okay, that's it. Yeah, once. Okay, so I guess we'll have to cancel the great paintball game at Egenster's annual dinner. No? Okay, we'll have to find a different answer. Okay. Shem Egenster Termais is Boston. I've given you a shirach Rabbi Viener for the very inspiring shir. You can have a great schus of Abbatz's Torah the Rabbah by sponsoring one of the Shiurim. Call Irgun Shir Torah at 718-851-8651 or 718-853-3950 or email to tapecenter@yeshivanet.com. Yashikar to everyone for coming, for listening, and for joining in. Chananya ben Akashem, Eretz HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Zachis Es Yisrael L'Fikr Hibbel Torah Mitzvos Shanema Adonai Chofetz Aman Tzidka Yagdul Torah V'Yader. Yadem Niskadosh Shmei Rabba. So we ask for the Khan of Kara Mashiach. They can make an high level basis so my God was my card of him on